So again, I'm Tabu. I'm the director of the Mississippi Coalition for Vietnamese American Fish Folks and Families. I received just an impromptu invitation to share my story. Um, well, to give some background context, I've been doing disaster response recovery work in the Gulf for almost 14 years now. I was born in Vietnam, but you can tell I love the Gulf because I acquired the Southern accent.
So hold on one second. So I was in Benoit, Swan Rock, and Taku.
Oh, wow, how
Yeah.
long was your tour?
Too long.
Oh, too long? And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
that's okay, sir. That's okay. So I started my community work right in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. I was volunteering with American Red Cross Salvation Army at the time. And when Hurricane Katrina struck, I was a resident of East Biloxi, and I really felt compelled to really try to help. So I worked at the FEMA Disaster Recovery Center, and ended up working in the nonprofit afterwards. And I was a case manager helping, like, I had a very high caseload, and I was helping, different populations with housing needs, all kinds of emergency needs, right? And then several years of work of that, and then it led to work on the census, and that's really important because we have next year the census, right? We really need good data, social economic data, and that means making sure people are actually counted, right? So I think we need to be proactive about making sure that our communities are all counted and represented in next year's census. And then not long after my census work, BP happened, right? And initially, I was just a case manager, but I became a community organizer, and I ended up traveling to DC a lot and meeting with, legislators and members of Congress, and really working on a lot of policy issues around equitable housing recovery, the funding for housing, right? And then the impacts of BP and what's happening, okay? And I think that what really needs to be done is recognizing the value of local community. Like, for example, the Christian community, they have great traditional ecological knowledge. Local people have great knowledge of their communities, right? And we need to develop a process or a system where we could tap into that, right? Or have that on the front end, right? And so in the aftermath of BP, I worked on everything related to BP. Everything from helping people to navigate the claims, right? And there's some things I really want to share that Mr. Bradley mentioned about the claims process, was that after the emergency claims, people were sent some interim payments, but they had to sign a legal waiver, right? And many times those documents were not translated to Vietnamese. So many of the Vietnamese fishermen in the Gulf, they actually waived their legal rights. When they cashed those checks, and they didn't know what was going to happen to their livelihood in the fisheries. And that's exactly what happened. Like in Mississippi, he mentioned earlier that our oyster reefs have been decimated, right? Well, those early years after BP, fishermen would receive compensation for maybe the first 2 seasons or 3 seasons at the most. Was 10 years later, right? Our reef, for the most part, is decimated, and we used to have a 6-7 month season. It was whittled down to last year was 9 days, right? And I also worked a lot on making sure people not only, help them with the claim, but helping them to navigate through the VIEW program, the Vessels of Opportunity program, right? And people, there were people who really didn't receive adequate training. There wasn't translated materials or a bilingual HAZWOP or instructor, right? So it was quickly, set up. And then after that was, helping the fishing communities with restoration, navigating restoration, which is complex with the whole natural resource damage assessment and informing the Restore Council and trying to follow and understand all of that. But in the aftermath of BP, we could see that there are deficiencies in the Oil Pollution Act. How come we can't tap into some of the oil spill liability trust funds, right, for health needs? Well, the unaddressed needs we have 10 years later, for oil spill preparedness, for unaddressed health needs, right, and other needs, or for community-based restoration projects, right, and another thing too is that it's been very challenging to to do this work because before a spill, many of us didn't have that connection or partnership or relationship. So it's taken several years of work of trying to build something with like federal agencies, state agencies, academics, right? So right now, my organization, we have been trying to foster relationships with academics and scientists, right? Not only the physical, but the social scientists to help bridge that gap and build more of this cross-sector approach, right, where we can learn and share from each other. Because I know of the earlier presentations was talking about like two different styles, right? And we need both, right? You know, analytical and experiential, right? Right? So we've been working on that, and we need to foster more of that, right? And how can we foster and build better relationships with like our federal and our state agencies as well, right? And doing that on the front end. So, and not in the midst or aftermath of disaster when we don't know each other and there's a lot of miscommunication or lack of cultural understanding of the local community. That leads to distrust, right? And we don't want that. We want to avoid all that. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned that in my work, I think moving forward that, you know, we consider like having the National Academy of Sciences as well as the Governmental Research Initiative and the Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant help initiate and establish. There we go. Thank you.
My name is Kathy Holmes, and I'm actually from the Navarre Beach Sea Turtle Conservation Center. And my involvement with the oil spill was actually from a wildlife perspective, which is really, after yesterday and today, I have come away with a whole lot of different thoughts on things that I think wildlife responders and wildlife operations folks really didn't think about till we started talking about health issues.
Right.
And you know, the community and everything like that, because our whole purpose was to ensure sensitive and critical lands were protected from any more destruction than was absolutely necessary and the spill happened on April 20th, and sea turtle nesting season starts May 1st. So there was a very short window there where they were trying to pull people together. Again, new for us, never had anything like this before. Hurricanes, we got it. You know, hurricane storms, that doesn't really faze us a whole lot, but the oil spill was very different and actually scary. There were a lot of people, myself included, that when we were deployed quickly, we had no training. So we knew what we needed to do for the sea turtles, we knew what we needed to do for birds, but we had no PASWAPR training, we had no protective gear in the beginning, other than manual crews to start with, and then mechanical crews that came in at a later date. So there was a lot of training and everybody keeps saying preparedness, and that we need to be ready like now for if it ever happens again, or any other odd thing, whether it's oil or something, some chemical spill or anything, that everybody would be ahead of the game and know what we needed to do. So my experience, for the most part, even though the disaster was horrible, was positive with the crews that I worked with and that I had to lead. And the one issue that we constantly had is we would get our crews up and going, and we may have 15, our maximum were 20 over there, 20 people at a time. So we were involved mainly in nighttime operations. I did get deployed once for Mississippi, and that was for in water, working with the VU people that would take us out, and we went to Horn and East and West Ship Islands and different places like that, checking for oiled wildlife. We didn't really come across a lot of oiled wildlife or oil in the water, but that was our main purpose for being out there for 3 weeks. And that was a whole different experience also, just with the different people with the different boats and how that was working with BP. Again, like Ryan had said, we would go to whatever place we were leaving from, and we got a little safety briefing, but that was about it. You know, when you're out on the water, you know, there was really not a whole lot about, there's a lot of oil out here, or, you know, we have a whole bunch of pelicans that are in the midst of this oil. other than our protective gear. We also did not have respirators. At one point, we did get masks at the beginning, but again, that is, that all needs to be in place immediately, not 2 weeks after you're already in the field doing something like that. The crews that we had, very long days, like you were saying, 7 days a week, you know, you could work 10-hour days, you could work 12-hour days, shift work, round-the-clock shift work, it never stopped. And people were exhausted. The wildlife observers were exhausted, the people on the manual crews, people were even running the equipment, because we did sand sifting right away. It didn't take long for them to get on the beach and start with the big sand sifters. And so the crews that we had over in Florida rotated out a lot. So you get your crew on track and everybody knew what we were looking for, everybody knew what needed to happen, and then that crew would be gone. And again, they weren't all local. We did have some local people, but for the most part, these people were coming in, again, from places far, far away. We had an opportunity at one point on the Bar Beach where we were getting ready to get onto the beach, and in the beginning, the wildlife observers or the sea turtle, anybody that was on a sea turtle permit, they contacted us first. So we were already on the permit, we knew what we were looking for, we had the experience in the field, we just didn't have oil spill experience. And before we went out, we had to clear a stretch of beach before the crews could get on, the manual crews or the mechanical, but in the beginning the manual. And I went down to clear the beach while the crew was all coming together in the parking lot, and there was a huge loggerhead sea turtle who decided to grace us that evening by nesting. But once she got into where she was going to nest, the opportunity to take this crew down to the beach to say, you hear about this and you've seen pictures, now you're going to see what we're talking about. Educational opportunity at that point was just unbelievable. So no lights, she was already in the nesting mode, we stood far enough away. And it took 45 minutes. They were delayed 45 minutes, but we couldn't get on the beach anyway because she was nesting, so they weren't allowed on the beach. But they had that 45 minutes to witness this, and then also actually see a loggerhead crawl, which is our main sea turtle species. When the mechanical crews came in, they were way up, and we were walking beside all of this equipment. They had a much better vision, field vision, you know, for what they could see. So it was that was a positive thing that came from that. I think the main thing were health issues that we never thought about, and in the Wildlife Observer, we never even talked about it or anything like that. And the fact that it was long hours, you had to wear. We didn't have to wear Tyvek suits unless we came across any kind of oiled wildlife or we were in an area where we knew there was oil. But it was hot. We had to wear long sleeves. We had to wear boots and things like that. And there's a lot of us that are in the long-term NIH health study from that. So a lot of heat index stuff, a lot of people that got dehydrated very rapidly, very quickly, especially doing daytime work. So.
Okay. Karen, how much time we got here?
I said 10 minutes.
I only got 10? Okay, then I'm only going to tell one story. Okay, just one. So I'm not going to concentrate on BP. Everybody's been picking on BP. I'm going to leave BP alone. I was involved in the BP spill. I had all the liaison officers from the command post all work for me in the 3 states. But I'm not going to pick on BP. I want to just tell this bureaucracy story. I was going to talk about, community actions of what happens if a fishing vessel sinks in Bayou Labadie, but that's going to take me about a half hour, so I don't want to go through that big, long dissertation about how the poor fisherman's going to get billed from the federal government if he doesn't clean up the spill. I don't want to go through that. Okay? So we'll talk about that after hours. But I want to tell this story about federal bureaucracy. So Hurricane Katrina, I was a project manager. I had about 300 people working for me. I had a large mission assignment from FEMA. I was telling Ryan, I had $265 million to clean up marine debris. Nobody's talking about marine debris. I did probably the largest marine debris cleanup in the history of the United States. Took us over 3 years to do it. So I just want to tell this one story. So I get a call one day, and I get a call from a funeral director of a cemetery in Biloxi, Mississippi. And he calls me up and he said, hey, I'm going through all kinds of stuff and they tell me the buck stops with you. I said, well, I'm not Harry Truman. I said, but the buck stops here with me. I said, what kind of problem you got? He said, I got a funeral this afternoon. He said, and I got a boat in the middle of the funeral plot of where this person's going to be buried. Right? Okay? And I don't know, did I ever tell you the story before?
No, but I think I know where.
You know where it's going? Okay. So I said, well, sir, I'm sorry, but I only do marine debris, and it's got to be in the water. I said, that's the Corps of Engineers. I said, they're ESF3, they do land debris. And the guy said, well, I already called the Corps of Engineers, and they told me because it's a boat, it's you. And they don't care if it's on land. I said, oh, this is good. And I can tell you stories about this thing till the cows come home. So I said, what kind of boat is it? He tells me what kind of boat. I said, is it fiberglass? He said, yes. I said, you know anybody with a chainsaw? He said, I do. I said, well, cut the darn thing up and throw it in the dumpster so you can get on with the funeral. That's a true story. So I could go on with stories about all kinds of stuff from a marine debris perspective, but I'd rather just field questions on anybody that has anything to do with Deepwater Horizon, Hurricane Katrina, super tanker spills, or anything you want to talk about, okay? I've been doing this stuff with the federal government for 49 years, and I've been involved in every major spill between Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida in those years. So I'll take any kind of questions anybody's got.
Okay, we're going to open it up for questions, but I'm gonna start with one. You guys don't have to answer it right now, but I want you to be thinking about it. So you're all telling stories of your experiences, community organizers, of working on crews, you know, endangered sea turtles, what it's like dealing with the bureaucracy and leading crews that are actually out there responding. But I want you to think about how those experiences and working through those disasters impacted you personally. What were the things you had to deal with personally? You know, that you had to take the weight of all of that and helping a lot of different people home at night. So I'm going to open up questions right here, but I'm going to come back to...
Can I tell one more story?
You're welcome to. You're welcome to. That one only took 5.5 minutes.
Okay, that's good. So, in Katrina, in Mississippi's got a derelict vessel program, not many states have, but in Katrina, a lot of people took their boats off of the harbor and they moved them inland, okay? So I got a call one day from a nice lady, and she's crying on the phone, and she says, I've lost my house, my boat's up in the marsh in Pascagoula River, my livelihood is stopped, my family's going to go on welfare, I'm destitute, what can you do to help me? And I said, you're in luck. I said, because my mission assignment doesn't restrict me to removing vessels from only navigable waters like just happened in Hurricane Michael in Florida. So that if you see vessels up in the marsh in Florida, it's because Florida doesn't have a derelict vessel program and they leave them in the marsh and they don't care about them because they don't want to spend the money. And most of the mission assignments from FEMA won't allow you to recover those things. So they just leave them there. If they're not spilling oil and they're not a hazard to the environment, they leave them. That's why you see vessels abandoned in Louisiana. Mississippi doesn't do that. So the lady calls me up. I said, you're in luck. I said, I've got a lot of money, and I said, I'm going to send a contractor out to get your boat out of the marsh, up in the Pascagoula River, refloat it, and you can go back in business and provide for your family. That lady jumped on me, started hugging me and kissing me, okay? And that's a true story. So it depends what the mission assignment says as to what you can do for the community, okay? And I did that on 147 boats in Mississippi.
Yes.
That's my second story.
That's an amazing story.
That's an amazing story.
Any questions for
That's a-
Carl or the others?
It's a true story.
Right here. Catherine?
My question is for Kathy, and thank you to everybody who's on the panel right now. But my specific question is, with places like the Navarre Beach Sea Turtle Education Center and other, education opportunities that are in communities affected by spills. How have you seen, these sort of connections with wildlife maybe foster empathy or connections in the community around the things that make these places special, so the sea turtles and other wildlife in the ecosystems? Do you see that play out in your work?
Yes, we do. We see that not only in, at our center, we're not a rehabilitation center. We are a center that holds non-releasable turtles for whatever reasons they can't go back to the wild. And right now, our current ambassador is Sweet Pea, and she's a juvenile green sea turtle that ended up entangled in fishing line, stranded on Ono Island in Alabama. Not only was she entangled, and that caused the loss of her left front flipper, and she had a boat strike that damaged her left rear flipper and took a chunk out of her shell. She also ingested fishing line and hooks. When people come to our center and we tell that story, some people actually cry. Other people think about the human impact on the environment, like the boat strike and the derelict fishing line and things like that. When people are able to witness sea turtles hatching, it is very emotional. And yes, that empathy component multiplies a lot. And what we need to do, not only to take care of our environment, but believe it or not, our communities. Let's keep Navarre Beach is tiny. It's a tiny spot with a lot of natural resources. We want to take care of that. We want to take care of the people that are in the community, and everybody wants to be on the same boat. So it's very powerful.
Others? Questions? Nothing? All of those great stories, yeah.
Carl, can you share what you did at Bayou de Bache?
Well, this is gonna take a while.
Go for it, Carl.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to spend a few minutes, in a young lady went from, I guess she went back to Bayou de Bache, but this is important for the community of Bayou de Bache, and I think this is really important. Mike Sams touched on it yesterday about the National Contingency Plan and also the Stafford Act. What he didn't have time to do is how do these things in reality impact the poor fisherman in Bayou de Bache if he has a spill? And I wanted to spend some time talking about that because I know the community in Bayou de Bache pretty good. Okay? And some of those folks don't understand federal bureaucracy, and I'll give you an example. So if fishing vessel X sinks at the dock in Bayou de Bache, and it's spilling oil, okay, then that fishing vessel owner has a responsibility to clean up the oil. And if he has the wherewithal, he can do it himself. And I think, and Petty Officer Lucas is back. And Petty Officer Lucas, for those of you who understand this, he's an FOSCR, which means he's a Federal On-Scene Coordinator's representative. He's not the captain, but he's a trained representative. So he'll go out there and and I'm not going to go through the bureaucracy or how the reporting mechanism works, but I'm going to answer this gentleman's question. So fishing vessel X sinks at the dock. Petty Officer Lucas goes out there and says, yeah, you got to clean this spill up, and you're responsible for X, Y, and Z. He gets it cleaned up. Petty Officer Lucas goes back out there, does all the paperwork, signs, seal, and delivered. The vessel sunk at the dock. We as the Coast Guard don't care that the vessel sank at the dock because it's not impeding navigation. However, if fishing vessel X can't pay for the cleanup, Petty Officer Lucas federalizes it, and lo and behold to Mr. Fishing Vessel X, guess what he's going to get? He's going to get a bill from the Department of Treasury. Okay, and I'm not going to tell you stories that I've had ladies call me up crying because their house was leaning. Okay, that's a fact. So, right? So he's going to get a bill. Petty Officer Lucas is going to do all the cost accounting. He's going to send it in the National Pollution Fund Center. They're going to send it over to Department of Treasury. Department of Treasury is going to send the bill to Fishing Vessel X and say, hey, you didn't have insurance. Okay, most of them don't. You didn't understand the liability. You can't throw Dawn dish liquid out here and disperse it all. You just got a bill from federal government for X, and if you don't pay it, we're gonna lien your house. Or we're gonna lien your, I don't know where Ryan may be left, but we're gonna lien your seafood house, okay? So that's what happens with the national contingency plan. So let me give you the different scenario. Let me give you the natural disaster scenario. Fishing vessel X, okay, Bayou La Battery, is going through the channel, okay, and Hurricane Katrina's come in, he doesn't get out of the way, and he sinks in the channel, okay, same scenario. He sinks in the channel, he's leaking oil. Okay, now we got ESF 10 going on. Pedro Lucas goes out there and says, wow, this was an act of God. You didn't do it on your own. This is an act of God. I'm not going to name the contractor, but I'm hiring salvage company. They're going to send divers down here. They're going to take your batteries out. They're going to get the oil off. Then I'm going to get a salvage company with a lattice boom crane and a deck barge or an A-frame barge, depending on how big the vessel is. We're going to pick it up. We're going to take it out of the navigable channel. We're going to turn around. We're going to set it up on land here for you. It's going to cost you $0, because that's Stafford Act funding. One situation, he's going to lose everything he's got. The other situation, doesn't cost him a penny. He's back in business. He patches up and he goes back to work. So that's what I think the community needs to understand, that, hey, when the federal government comes out there, Petty Officer Lucas, and I'm just picking on him because he's qualified to do it, and you sink at the dock, you're going to get hammered. You are going to get hammered. But you're not going to get hammered if it sinks in a channel under an act of God. And I don't think this has been relayed at all to the community. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yes, you're right.
Thank you very much. I was right the first time this year. But anyhow, I just wanted to, does that answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, so how does the community respond to that? Are you,
Well, unfortunately,
Yeah, can
the
they do-
community, and then I'll give you an example, okay? Back when I had a different job, okay? And these are true stories, okay? Lady calls me up crying. She said, I'm going to lose my house. Commander, what can you do to help me? I said, what are you talking about? Exact scenario that I just told you. Exactly like that. Her husband said, screw it, we're not paying the government. They're not going to do nothing. This is true. Time passes by. Their house is lean. My house is lean. Is there any way you can help me? We're going to lose our house. She gives me the whole big scenario. There are some mechanisms where you can get this thing circumvented, and there are some people that have certain authorities that can say, okay, we'll pay for it. That's the only thing they can do, is they can lobby for the FOSC, which is Federal On-Scene Coordinator, to say that, yes, we will absorb that cost and we will basically eat it. Okay, it doesn't happen very often, but it can be done, okay? Extenuating circumstances, and there's got to be a lot of documentation to support that. But by and large, the average person doesn't know how to do that, and they don't know who to call, because they'll call some number and then they'll say, well, do you want to go to Prevention Department, Response Department, Lieutenant Jones, Billy Bob Smith, or whoever, and they'll never get to the right person. Okay, the bureaucracy is unbelievable. But every now and then, like you know me, because I came to this thing, you had to call me, and I'm going to go over and talk to Petty Officer Lucas. I'm going to say, hey, is there any way you can help these folks? And if he's a good guy, he'll say yes, and if he's one of those not so good guys, he'll say no. You know? But that's how it really works, ladies and gentlemen, and it's tragic. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's tragic. If the community doesn't understand what they're getting, like I said, this lady's husband said, screw it, I'm not paying the federal government. Wrong answer. Not a good answer. So those are the ins and outs of oil spills that, you know, and I've said it 100 times, I'll say it again. If the CEO of BP was here, he'd tell you the same thing. BP went above and beyond. I promise you they did. Okay? They didn't have to do anywhere near what they did. There's COFA. Now all commercial people have what's COFA, Certificate of Financial Responsibility. All the vessels transiting in to Tyler's facility in Chevron, they all got COFAs. Okay, they have a Certificate of Financial Liability if they spill oil. Okay. BP way exceeded their COFA. They could have walked away from that a long time ago, went back to Britain and said, have a nice day, we're out of Gulf of Mexico. But they didn't do it. I'm not going to tell you why they didn't do it, but They didn't, and anybody that got any money from them, in my opinion, was very fortunate. Okay, very fortunate. So, that's all. That's all I'm
Final
gonna say.
questions? I'm gonna come back to you guys with my question. Any final questions from the audience? Okay, so back to my question that I had for you. How did you handle the stress of what it was you were doing, responding,
Well, I had chest
rescuing?
pains.
Yeah?
Honest to God, I did.
Did you seek help for it?
Yeah, I got a quadruple bypass.
No, I believe you.
Believe it.
Yeah. Kyle?
That's probably as serious as you get.
That is serious as a heart attack.
Yeah, I called up my boss, Ed Stanton, if any of you know guys, Ed Stanton. I went in for routine physical and I said, Captain, you're not gonna believe this. I said, they're gonna crack my chest open tomorrow and do a quadruple bypass. He said, quit joking. So, this stuff's serious business.
Got scars to show it.
I do, I'm sure do.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's critically important to have a support system. So I'm a wife and I'm a mother of 3 young children. After I got married, right in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, where there was a lot of tunnel debris in East Biloxi, and I have vivid memories. But in doing the kind of work you do in the community, you have to have a love and a passion. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of sacrifices. It's meaningful, it's very meaningful, but it's challenging, and it's really realizing that, that there are going to be challenges and issues, right, and long days, a lot of traveling. I travel all across the Gulf since Hurricane Katrina, particularly since BP. I don't get to go back to some of the communities as much as I would like to, but it's having that support system. And my health actually has been ailing the past several years since BP. Mr. Bradley knows, Ryan knows, I'm always sick with the cold or flu. I've been through several rounds of Tamiflu, but the work has kept me busy, and by the grace of God, I'm just trying to persevere and just hang in there. 'Cause at the end of the day, the Gulf is, the Gulf, and for the community, you can't put a monetary amount on it. There's a reason why we don't leave after disasters, because it's home. I just want to end with that.
I would say the same thing. I was stressed, there was no doubt about it, and that showed up in a lot of different ways. But I was also, I have a tendency to worry about other people. Like if there's worry, just give it to me, I'll handle that for you. So I was worried about the crews that I was with, because I could see people getting really tired. People that I had worked with, like in the sea turtle world forever, were exhausted. And so everybody was very, very stressed. A couple people, I wasn't in this group, but a couple people that I worked with actually ended up in the hospital with stress-related type symptoms, chest pains. People did get dehydrated and sick from that dehydration, myself included on several occasions. But again, community and a support system. So at least you have somebody to, you're going in for your night shift, I am so tired and I'm so dehydrated. People would know they were dehydrated going into their shift. Once you reach that dehydration level, it's really hard to get back to where you need to be. But I would say of everything that we were dealing with long hours, other people in this same boat with stress. Mine was just big stress, a lot of stress. Not being able to sleep when I needed to sleep and things like that.
Does anybody have any final questions at all for the panel? I'd like to thank them all.